artifacts. It had absolutely nothing to do with aliens and everything to do with energy. I came to Costa Rica to build a renewable energy center.
Joe Felz's last message about his pain before death, broken heart, and the words he chose to leave behind carried a weight that anyone who read them would never be able to forget, because they revealed a deeply hidden side of his struggle that had remained completely invisible to the outside world until it was far too late to change the outcome. When this message finally came to light, it shattered the carefully constructed image of a man who seemed to have everything under control, replacing it with a devastatingly raw portrait of someone who had been quietly drowning, while everyone around him believed he was simply navigating the normal pressures of his daily life. The mere existence of this final communication raised immediate and painful questions about how someone could be suffering so profoundly, while the people closest to him remained entirely unaware. And as the emotional weight of what he wrote began to settle over those who knew him, the atmosphere shifted from one of grief over a tragic loss to something far more complex and haunting, a chilling realization that the signs had been there all along. Buried just beneath the surface of his unwavering commitment to keeping up appearances, Joe Felz was, by all outward accounts, the kind of person you would never suspect was carrying such a heavy burden, a dedicated and focused individual who approached his responsibilities with a seriousness and a quiet determination that earned him the respect of everyone who crossed his path. But that exact dedication became the very shield that prevented anyone from seeing the depth of his internal pain. The message itself did not read like the words of someone who had simply had a bad day or a difficult week. It carried the unmistakable tone of a person who had been engaged in a long, exhausting battle against their own mind and spirit, a battle they had fought entirely in the shadows, because asking for help felt like an admission of failure that he simply could not bring himself to make. The tragedy of this is almost unbearable to think about, because each of those moments represented a potential turning point, a fraction of a second, where the right question from the right person might have changed everything. But instead, they were allowed to pass without comment, swallowed by the busy momentum of daily routines and the dangerous assumption that Joe, being Joe, would naturally handle whatever was on his mind the way he always seemed to do. His last message about his pain served as a mirror held up to the faces of everyone who knew him, reflecting back the uncomfortable truth that they had been looking at him without truly seeing him, listening to him without truly hearing him, and interacting with him without ever pressing beyond the surface level to ask the deeper questions that might have cracked open the fortress he had built around his suffering. The emotional weight of the message was not just in the sadness of the words themselves, but in the overwhelming sense of missed opportunities that accompanied them, the agonizing what-ifs that began to haunt the people in his circle as they replayed every conversation, every shared silence, every opportunity to say the simple words "Are you okay?" that might have opened the door he had locked so tightly from the inside. What made Joe's situation even more poignant was the nature of the pain he described, which was not limited to a single event or a specific crisis, but seemed to stem from an accumulation of invisible pressures, the kind of slow, grinding wear on a person's spirit that happens so gradually that even the person experiencing it might not realize how deep the damage has gone until they reach a point where they can no longer see a way forward. His message spoke of feeling overwhelmed by expectations, both those placed upon him by the outside world and those he had placed upon himself, a dual burden that had slowly eroded his ability to cope, leaving him feeling as though he was perpetually falling short of some impossible standard that he had constructed in his own mind. This self-imposed pressure is one of the most insidious forms of emotional pain, because it does not come with an obvious external enemy that can be confronted or defeated. It is an internal war where the person fighting it is also the one fueling it, and Joe's final words captured that devastating cycle with a clarity that left those who read them stunned into a heavy, breathless silence. The reaction to the emergence of this message was one of collective heartbreak, not just because a life had been tragically cut short, but because the message transformed the situation from a simple, sad headline into a deeply human symbol of the silent struggles that millions of people face behind closed doors every single day. The realization that his pain had been leaking through the cracks of his facade for months, perhaps even years, before he finally put it into words in that last message added a profound layer of sorrow to an already unbearable grief, because it meant that the tragic outcome was not a sudden lightning strike out of a clear blue sky, but rather the final collapse of a structure that had been weakening for a very long time. A collapse that might have been prevented if anyone had noticed the cracks soon enough to offer support. The specific way the message was discovered only added to the emotional devastation, as it was not found in a dramatic or public way, but rather in a quiet, private manner that made the intimacy of his suffering feel even more acute, a whisper of truth left behind in a world that had been too loud to hear him while he was still here. Reading those words, you could feel the profound exhaustion radiating from every line, the kind of exhaustion that goes far beyond needing a good night's sleep and reaches into the very core of a person's will to keep going. A bone-deep fatigue that makes the idea of waking up and facing another day feel like an insurmountable mountain rather than a simple fact of life. He wrote about the feeling of letting people down, a fear that had apparently consumed him even as he was giving everything he had to the people around him. A cruel irony that those who give the most are often the ones who feel they have given the least, and this distorted self-perception had clearly taken root in Joe's mind, poisoning his ability to see his own worth through the eyes of the people who loved and respected him. The message also touched upon the concept of time, specifically the feeling that time was running out and that the window for things getting better was slowly closing, a dark and claustrophobic sensation that mental health professionals warn is one of the most dangerous psychological states a person can experience. Yet it is a state that is almost entirely invisible from the outside unless the person finds a way to articulate it. Joe did articulate it, but he did so in a way that would only be seen after the worst had already happened, leaving his loved ones to grapple with the agonizing knowledge that the help he needed had been right there all along, waiting behind a door that he never felt strong enough to open. The heartbreak of his story is not only that he is no longer here, but that he felt he had to face his darkest moments entirely alone, crafting a message about his suffering that would only be truly understood after it was too late for anyone to reach out and pull him back from the edge, a haunting final chapter to a life that appeared so put together on the outside, but was quietly and tragically falling apart on the inside. Leaving behind a legacy that will forever be a powerful and painful reminder of the invisible weight that so many people carry in silence, and the urgent need for all of us to become better at seeing the unseen people to know.